Laurie. And what is the Substack called? Or what do you want to call it? Or what do we call it? What are we introducing you as? Just Laurie, a busy dad who's got some cool tech to tell us about.
Yeah, let's do like more just around, more like startup stuff.
What's that
So
mean?
generally like early stage businesses.
Really?
So
Is that
like
really where you're going now?
That's my thing, right? Like I work in VR with VR startups.
Right.
I do a lot of work with other early stage companies as well. So these are people who are working from, I have this idea, how do I go and get that funded? But specifically in technology around like VR and AR and gaming. So these are companies that require a lot of capital up front. So people are looking to go and raise money because they have an idea, rather than someone who, was just starting a smaller like gardening business where they get money in straight away. These are people who want to create like bigger projects. So they need a lot of capital up front because it might take a year to develop a game or to develop a project that they want. The niche that I kind of have found myself in is really in VR, so virtual reality, and AR technology, so AR, augmented reality, which is using things like phone cameras to augment your environment. So things like Pokemon Go is like a really common mainstream example of AR, but these technologies are becoming more easy to produce as things like iPhones get better, and also more commonplace across markets. So my start in VR technology was working with automotive brands around, so they make hundreds of concept designs, and all of that used to be in 2D. So they're drawing this on iPads in Photoshop, and they have these 2D images of cars. And while that's helpful for designers, it's not very helpful for engineers because there's a big translation between 2D and 3D that's lost. So we started out developing a software that enables automotive companies to sketch their designs directly into 3D using VR technology. And that business has grown. We successfully kind of raised capital, developed that product, and now work with kind of anyone who's interested in 3D design. And then through that, just kind of really realized that I loved that process of, okay, we have this early stage idea. We now want to go and make this kind of into a product, and met a lot of other amazing people in the VR industry because it's very early, of people who are like, oh, I want to do this. So people who want to do VR tools for athletes, VR tools for...
How would that work then? Why VR for athletes? What do they need?
Yeah, so like a common way that athletes review games, for example, is all 2D. So it's basically, how do we take what is currently 2D and make it 3D? Because everything we do in the world is 3D. So like about how you learn things, how you play sports, everything is obviously in our 3-dimensional environment. So like the example of that sports project was, okay, athletes are reviewing game film in 2D on iPads. They're getting a lot of data, which is just flat 2D. Can we use that data and use that 2D film to create 3D scenarios? So i.e. think of something like FIFA, that's like a 3D world, and put that into a VR scene so that when players come to review their game footage, they put on a VR headset and now they're at their point of view perspective. So instead of them watching themselves back in 2D, they now can be in that scene and watch it from 3D perspective. And like, these are the new unlocks that VR is going to make in the world, because yes, that applies to sports, but it also applies to McDonald's, for example, are now starting to roll out training in the US in VR, because instead of you now watching a video of like, oh, this is how you serve a customer, this is how you move around the kitchen. If you create that in a 3D scene and put them in a headset, when they actually then come to that situation in real life, they've already been in that space in 3D. And so the learning curve for them is so much lower.
Wow.
But these technologies are very expensive to produce. So startups, so younger companies who kind of have these ideas and want to go and sell to these big brands, usually need to go and raise capital to do that.
Amazing. So back to the sport one. So for example, like that way with the 3D, then you can see the gaps in the game. You can see where the ball could have gone, right? And you're not just staring at it as a flat sort of
one
image.
So we did some testing around this with a rugby team. And the big unlock for them was actually that the coaches are not on the field during the game. So when they're reviewing the footage, they're saying to the player, oh, you shouldn't go left here, you need to run right. But they don't actually know what it was like in that scenario. But so if you create like quite a basic 3D scene and then put the coach in the headset at that point of view, they can now look around that scene and go, oh, that's why he didn't go left, because when he looks there, it doesn't look like there's that much space. So we need to retrain him that actually when there is that amount of space, or when they are that close to a player, like that's the decision that they need to take. So it becomes much more about decision making, and that's the same application to other industries. Like VR is now doing quite well with military training and firefighting and that sort of thing.
Oh, wow. That's just insane. Because obviously it was used at first. Well, it wasn't VR, was it? It was just the goggles were used for drones, weren't they? So that kind of...
Well, yeah, that's one. That's a common application of it as well.
Right.
That it can basically put you somewhere that you're not. So
yeah, amazing. And so really then, your main thing started with VR and all of that, and you're like now really passionate about helping businesses get started.
Yeah.
And you also, I mean, you were also telling me about this thing called Substack, which I'm not sure if anyone knows about or not, but it's like, I mean, I was trying to just explain it to family and saying you're coming over, and it was like, so I'll say what I thought it was, and then you tell me how wrong I am. So I thought it was a bit like Reddit, which again, people might not even know.
Yeah.
So it's like a kind of like a newsletter-y kind of thing, but it's taken off mad, but I still haven't managed to get into using it yet. Right. So tell me a bit about this Substack for people at home.
Yeah, so I mean, Substack as a platform is effectively just like a blogging / newsletter platform. But what it can achieve or unlock for kind of startups is it bridges the gap between people kind of just putting their thoughts out into the world, into the ether, and combining that with kind of newsletter marketing. So if they can grow an audience of people who are also interested in their technology, they can start like broadcasting their thoughts to them in kind of written format, embed videos, and it kind of just becomes this medium to communicate with people who are interested in what you have to talk about. So how I kind of got started in that was through meeting all these different people in VR. I had a friend who was doing lots of conversations with people who work in VR, a little bit like this. And we kind of realized, hey, there's this big backlog of audio and video content, but it's not always that easy for people to engage with that, especially people who, are really busy and people who are in businesses. Whereas email is like a very common communication, and everybody's on their email all day. So how can we take some of those interviews where there's like some real gold in there for founders or for people who want to invest in VR, and turn that into kind of weekly content, kind of summarizing what that business is, what that business does.
Like reading the headlines of a newspaper in that kind of pyramid format, where you start with a small clip of like what the subject can be about, and then you can decide whether you want to read into it more.
Yeah.
And then also, I think probably a good thing about text is that text is so much more searchable via Google and via other search engines. Yeah. So if you were looking for something specific, like I wanted to search like, VR for rugby teams, then it would jump me all the way to that sort of section.
Yeah.
Whereas if I put a podcast out there and a video, which would be full of facts and super interesting, it might be hard for the SEO, the search, to find that podcast and find those words inside it. Even though now we've got AI that can read entire podcasts like video, and then publish that video as a script as well.
Mm. Yeah, but then also like the other, I think, unlock that people are finding with Substack, and there's other mediums that do kind of this newsletter sort of marketing thing, is that email is like the medium through which everyone networks, right? Like if you want to introduce me to someone in a business sense or a personal sense, like over, 70% of that in the business context is through email. And so how we started finding growth in talking about VR over newsletters was that the power was actually just being in someone's inbox every week.
Yeah.
So like our kind of breakdowns or our understanding of the industry being in those people's inboxes, and then they would comment back sometimes and say, oh, hey, really like this one, or like, oh, I actually want to meet that guy who's doing that business. And then you kind of can be like the unlock for both sides there, people who want to broadcast their ideas as well as people who want to connect with those people.
Yeah, you were saying when we were talking about this at a CrossFit event, which we could talk about in a bit, but you were saying also it is easier for people to read still at their desk rather than always like LinkedIn is good, but a lot of people are also on LinkedIn. And the reason LinkedIn is really popular as well is that some people do write really good articles on LinkedIn and then have a video as well. Because often people on their work computers don't want to like put their headphones in or plug in a screen, but they still want to try and browse some information that's related to work, and it could be factual. Yeah. So, but really, like, so what else? Like, so then when you delved into the Substack world, like, why do you think it's sort of super taken off for in opposed to like these other like forums or like websites? Like,
well, yeah, so
you have to imagine people at home have never heard of it. So they might now suddenly go, can they go and find a Substack on cars or on gardening?
Yeah, 100%.
But why is it different to say Pinterest then? Or Instagram?
Because it revolves around the kind of written content there. And like, so basically my own story, and that was like, oh, okay, I work in VR. I'm really interested in VR. I want to share my thoughts and other people that I know's thoughts.
Get the conversation going
as well. Yeah.
So it's a two-way street.
So then through broadcasting that, other people who also have ideas, especially like in our kind of tech industry, they say, oh, I also want to do one of those too. And so like, that's kind of how the transition for me is now, talking to other people in VR and people who invest in VR around doing that same content for them. And I think why kind of newsletter marketing and why Substack is powerful is that it's just because of the medium that it exists in. So like you're saying, it's much harder for people it's much more intentional to go and engage with like an hour-long podcast or something like that. Whereas email, it kind of bridges the gap between the intention of searching out a video and LinkedIn, where you receive information passively, because it's like, I've signed up for this newsletter, or I've signed up to hear this person's thoughts. So that's the level of intention.
Okay.
But then it also has the passivity of like, that's in your inbox. You don't have to read it right now. You don't actually have to ever read it, or you can read a little bit of it. Whereas, I think the way that people consume video content is a little bit more intentional.
Right. And so I get an email from you, right? Just to really spell this out for people.
Yeah.
In the email, it links you to your Substack. But do you have different stories that are released like a newspaper? So say, for example, each week you would have put 5 different sections on this. So you'd have an interview with someone,
right.
You'd have a release of I think you were telling me you have a release of a new product that you're quite excited about, a new headset or a new type of camera that would be great for taking to. So is it kind of like, so the newsletter points me to the Substack and then has different divisions of information I can put on?
Yes. So, I mean, Substack as a platform itself lives like something like Reddit or like any other website where you could go on that and view it, but actually it also distributes to your personal email list. So when you hit publish on whatever you've created on Substack, it not only lives on your own Substack page, but it also goes to the people who follow you's inbox.
Right. So, okay. So it's like, it mixes some of that old school mail listing that we used to have.
Yeah.
And so for businesses that have not thought of having Substack, any business, so like could be anything, right?
Yeah.
How do you think they could get something started? So you were telling me earlier about it's a brilliant way to like convert some of your existing content and reach new members.
Yeah. So I guess how my bridge into that kind of from more of like a service related sense is that within this kind of tech ecosystem, there are so many events. There's a lot of like webinars. There's a lot of people just sharing updates around their kind of products or their venture capital firm, and they're just living kind of as video content. But the strength that kind of written content has is that you can kind of repurpose anything into written content. So whether it's a video or a real event or just an opinion that you have, it always can work itself into written content. So the when we started sending that out, people who wanted to engage with that, might have already be doing like a weekly webinar, or they might be doing live videos, or they might have a bank of videos like this, like interviews. And so we can take that content for them, turn that into these newsletters for them, and then they can start sending them out, start promoting them. And there isn't a lot of work there because they've already done all of the work of creating the webinar in the first place, or they already have their archive of like YouTube.
Right.
Videos.
So then let's also, so say for example, we've also got a project, like we're building a new building, or we're making a game, and you've got investors and you've got people that want to have updates.
Right.
So rather than, could you also make like a private Substack that's more like project based? So it's more like an update.
Yeah. So you could choose who specific things go out to.
Right.
So like, yeah, we work, for example, with a VR company that is releasing a game, and it's not released yet. So they don't want to be posting on social media all the time about what they're doing.
Yeah.
But there are people that have either invested in that or have actively said to them, hey, I want to receive updates about this. So that's like a separate list, and they can create kind of weekly content for them.
Rather than just doing like a project email this way, because on the Substack, like a website, you can embed PDFs, you can probably embed videos, you can link to all of that.
Yeah.
And then it's hosted and it's protected. Whereas if we made a weekly project email, like, people in businesses do, or like, they're like, right, this week, let's have a Teams call.
Right.
Then people miss the Teams call. Then they're like, oh, I'll email everybody the video. That video went from living in the cloud to then somebody downloading it and then emailing it to everyone, and then it disappears.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we have the technology out there, but we're not using it the way it should be. So so for companies and teams and projects, they can store all of this in a third place.
Yeah. And so, I mean, email marketing is totally not new, right? Like, and I'm not anyone innovative in email marketing. I guess it's just like, we're so used to receiving email marketing from, anyone from ASOS all the way to even Google itself is sending you email marketing. But
Google sends me email marketing about the new watch every day.
Right, exactly.
Like 3 times a day.
So we're very used to receiving that that kind of thing. And like, I guess just, again, this is nothing really innovative. It's just putting in the time to kind of make that service for people, is saying to them, hey, we know a lot about early stage tech. We know a lot about VR. There's a lot of people who are interested in your product and what you're working on. So let's get that out in this format.
Sure. And as you said, it also has a sense of community behind it. So people can drop comments, and they can start a conversation around a topic. So say you've dropped the weekly newsletter, and you said like, this is the new headset, this is some of the new features it's going to have. People can even start that conversation straight away by saying like, oh, I'm really excited about X feature because I've been needing that for my business.
Yeah.
And then even while people are like product developing and stuff like that, they can even start receiving feedback on whether they think like, rather than like, I know it's obviously really big for people like Sony and people like that who release cameras and stuff. But for example, I look at camera videos all the time. There's sometimes you watch these videos, and in the comments and in a lot of the videos, it's like, why did they remove that feature? And yet they would be like, well, how do they receive that market research back? But if they'd actually started pre-releasing like a Substack to their new camera, like a year, 2 years in advance, saying, guys, this is what we're thinking of doing, they would have already got that feedback so much earlier, saying, please do not remove that feature, And so similarly, that also can work on a massive scale, like for someone like Sony, or even just a smaller scale.
Exactly. And I guess like, for me, like, I enjoy making that content, and I really like the businesses that are doing those things. And I really like the VR, AR industry. And I really like the kind of people who are investing in that and their thoughts around that. And this was kind of just a way for me to be a part of that with them as well, because it's like it works as a vehicle for me. If I'm creating content with them and for them, then I get the behind the scenes of what they're doing.
Oh, you get the early gossip.
Yeah, a little bit. And like like I was saying, like, this is kind of I'm not the first person.
Don't
to do
worry
it.
about
It's
it.
just
No
like
one's
in
going to
the-
know. I told you.
No.
All of my guys never know. They could think you were the first astronaut to go to the moon. Like, you know as well about communities and about podcasts and about things like that. Is that I was saying this to a friend yesterday on a podcast. I was saying, like, creatine, for example, right? To take it back to my fitness swap, right? Do you take creatine?
Yes.
Yeah, right. But if you'd never heard of creatine, you just started going to the gym, right? You could watch 100 videos on YouTube about creatine. Right now, you can go search for them any time of day. But if you were friends with me or one of your friends, so how did you first decide to take it? Like, do you see what I mean? It's like you ask a friend, you say, hey, to your mate down the gym, like, oh, hey, have you tried hack squats? Yeah. Or like, have you got any pointers for me about overhead squats? Because you live within your own tribe, within your own community. So as much as you think like you're not the first person to do it, right? There may be people listening to this, for example, who've got recruitment businesses, and they might be thinking like, you know what? I'm tired of like publishing the changing of like, because recruiters love to talk about where the market's going for their guys, and suddenly these new roles coming out. Like, obviously, I've got great ADHD, so I can bounce you down a whole new road now. So you've got the writers' strike. Okay, in America, this is going to link into you, doesn't it? Right. So the big writer strike in America, the reason why a lot of them are kicking off is because of AI. They're really worried about multiple things. I found out they're worried about actors are worried about turning up, being scanned by cameras, and then being told they can go home. So once they've been scanned for $120, $500 for the day, they didn't continually get that $500 every day. They just got scanned once and then got sent home, and then their likeness then got used in the background, which they used to get $500 a day. I know it's crazy money, being extra, but that was their career, that was their life. So as much as you maybe in your bubble, which is a massive AR, VR world, loads about that. There's so many other businesses that or people that are like, don't pick up on stuff like ChatGPT. What do you think of ChatGPT?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I've lived at this edge of early stage tech for quite a long time now. So generally I'm quite pro changes and things that advance forward in tech. But yeah, you're totally right. Like, I think one of the things for me around that kind of content was, and I think maybe you might even go through this as well, where it's like, well, why should I be the person who makes that content? Like, why should Rupert be making videos about fitness? And actually it's more a point of like, you are consuming a lot of information like we all are all the time. How can I aggregate the things that I'm interested in or I know and repurpose those? And actually for other people, then it becomes, a quicker way for them to consume content, and you can kind of just become this like aggregator of information.
Yeah, like have you listened to Andrew Huberman podcast?
Yeah, I'm aware of him.
Yeah. I mean, they're 2.5 hours long, and in the middle of them, sometimes you can literally black out. Like,
right, and so they're
so hard to listen to.
And I imagine this already exists, but like there will be someone somewhere who is making a lot of money by writing a newsletter that is just summarizing the Andrew Huberman podcast every week. And I don't want to watch 2 hours of Andrew Huberman talking. Yeah. But I might want to receive an email every week that goes, Andrew Huberman had this person on, they talked about this, this, and this. Right. And that takes me 2 minutes to read. And people would want to receive that, but they don't necessarily want to sit down and watch a 2-hour interview with Huberman. And just back to your kind of point about AI, like while AI is really good at kind of synthesizing and summarizing all these things, what AI doesn't have, and this is, the pitch that we say to VCs or AR, VR founders that we do great written content for, is it doesn't foreknow the specificity of stuff. So it can look back at a lot of the internet and it can summarize things and it can make assumptions and it can also make kind of like algorithmic predictions or what look like opinions, but it doesn't have your opinions and it doesn't have your thoughts. And so that's kind of really like key around, yes, AI can be this vehicle to help us produce more content, but you are always the edge. Like there's this great thing that I think about all the time with regards to like, AI is going to come along and it's going to remove all of the 3D modelers who work in video games, or AI is going to come along and it's going to remove all the people who write the stories for video games, or AI is going to come along and it's going to displace people who create written content or
yeah,
whatever.
the writer strike in America, that's the other part of it. It wasn't just the actors that were getting scammed. It was obviously the main thing was that you can just give it a premise, give it a few characters, especially if you give it 5 years of Law and Order scripts, if you can somehow feed that into it, and then tell it just to please write a new season.
And sure, like it can do that. But I think it kind of misses the point that like if you didn't have an edge before insert technology, you won't have an edge after insert technology.
Yeah.
So like
just explain that. I know what you mean, but just really break that down. The edge, right?
Yeah.
Is the creative spark, the sort of je ne sais quoi, the little moment that you had to drive into these tools.
Yeah, and like I see that can see this all the time. Like choose your medium, whether it's YouTube, Substack, Twitter, whatever. Like look at the best creators there. They will still be the best creators on the other side of AI. They will just be able to create more, or they will be able to use their time more efficiently. But they will still be them. And so this is like, I don't want to make a comment that I'm not educated enough to know about the writer's strike, but in terms of like the people who are the best writers, like the creators of Law and Order, will still be the best creators. They will just use different tools.
Yeah. So a lot of people now that don't use AI or ChatGPT, there is a lot of skills you still have to learn in order to use it to its full advantage. So for example, in my world, right, I had a full-on 20-minute argument with ChatGPT the other day, right? I'm wrangling it and I came up with this job title, which you're free to steal, and I'm sure there's already a couple going around, which is that I'm going to put on my CV, AI Wrangler, right? Because basically, ChatGPT is great and it will write you like punchy, like topic, like punchy little headline, right? But when you start using it every day, you realize that you're like, I mean, I'm not saying I can figure out I know what it sounds like, but I do. Like, I'm quite sure that I'm like, I feel like you use ChatGPT to write that because I know it's kind of rhythm. But if you punch into it a different rhythm and like you learn these tricks, like I saw one yesterday. You set ChatGPT a classic title. So you say, like, I want to make this newsletter, right? I need you to have 5 years business experience. I'm not sure that even really works fully, right? But it's a nice little line to type in. Then you're meant to write like something like, I want it to come across as like a medium business tone, semi-formal, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people don't know this. You and me know this because we use it nearly probably all the time. But a lot of people didn't know those simple tricks. One of my favorite things to do at work is ask people if they've used it. And then I sit them down and show it to them. Yeah. And I love that moment where their face and they go, what? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, so I never have to write an email again. Right. And I'm like, no, you do.
Yeah. I remember that as well. Like, so I think obviously like generative AI, or at least OpenAI's product version of that has been around since I think November. So coming up on a year of that, which is crazy to think how like impactful that's been. But I remember actually seeing probably maybe 18 months before that as company Copy AI and another company that was is now called Jasper, but it was called Jarvis. They got sued by Marvel. That was doing the same thing, but in a very specific niche for advertising copy. And I remember the first time I used that tool, and you're like, okay, make me ad copy about cat food, and it gives you it, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
But I think what AI, or what people need to understand about AI when people get worried about it, is that remembering that AI doesn't have taste. And I think the best example that I give all the time to, friends who don't work in tech around this is go on YouTube and type in Lupe Fiasco makes a song with AI. And if you don't know who Lupe Fiasco is, he's basically was a fairly successful rapper in the early 2000s, wrote songs for Kanye West, Jay-Z. And he basically sits down and he has this AI songwriter tool, and he has his notepad where he writes lyrics, and he has like a beat, and you watch him use the tool. And so he puts in, okay, we're going to make a song about this, and it obviously transcribes this song, and it's good and it's okay. But the magic comes when it combines with his talent. Yeah. And just watching that video that's like 10 minutes long is obviously just in the music medium, but this applies everywhere. And I think that's the video that I always tell people to go and watch, to understand like why this is not, the be all of end all of everything.
It's not the Terminators taking over the world yet. It's not the full
and maybe
not the full lockdown.
And maybe there is a world where that those kind of more scary things do happen, and those are things that people obviously have to take seriously, but on like in the short to medium term, and on like a personal kind of day-to-day level, like watching a video like that is where you can see like, okay, like again, if you didn't have an edge before AI, you're not going to have an edge after AI.
So let's go back to a bit of the technology that you work in, then the VR and the augmented reality, right? And this question is going to maybe come across a bit complicated, but I want you to sort of explain at which a product gets to a certain level where it becomes cheap enough for the actual world to start using it, you know, like day to day. So like right now we're talking about rugby teams. These cameras are probably quite expensive. I mean, in my world, in property though, suddenly 360 cameras came down from like £2,000 like 5 years ago. They're now like 100 quid, you know, and then you can do static shots of properties around tours of properties and, you know, do little, they're not like augmented realities, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could then hook that up to some goggles and start to get a bit more of a feel for it. But what sort of experience have you seen of like where we hit these tipping points and stuff becomes like so cheap that it just then gets thrown out to the world.
It becomes normalized.
And then you see what the world then does with it as well.
Yeah. And so, I mean, AI is a really good example of that as well, that can tie into explaining a bit more about AR and VR. Like AI is incredibly expensive for companies to run. And it has like AI and generative AI is not new. Like people were working on this in the early 2000s. But the computers and the compute power and the cloud power and all of that is so expensive to run and it required like incredibly expensive graphics cards. But as the demand for those graphics cards goes up, the research and development into that industry also goes up because those companies are making more money, means they make better products and the cost of them comes down. And that same thing is kind of happening in AR and VR where the demand for those products is increasing. So the companies who are making them, either start plugging in more capital to make them cheaper or they start making more money to then make them cheaper. And so like VR in its kind of mainstream conception has probably been around for slightly over 10 years, but those first headsets were very, very expensive. So like Oculus is the company that then got bought by Facebook, which now makes the Oculus Quests, which is kind of like the most consumer version of a VR headset.
But that hasn't even, sorry to jump in there, that hasn't even gone like Xbox big or PlayStation
it's
big
funny
yet.
You say that. I think it's obviously a pinch of salt from someone who's a big pro of that in the industry, but the Meta Quest 2, so Facebook's VR headset, sold 10 million units, which is the same number as Xbox last year.
Wow.
And so,
you know, you just as a parent though, you don't. I mean, okay, my kid is still, my daughter is still quite young, but I didn't really see it like 10 million units. Like you didn't really see like kids all saying they're playing these insane games.
Of course, yeah. So pinch of salt there because Facebook released that number, so they want that to be higher. They're about to release the Quest 3. It comes out on the 10th of October. Anyone wants to buy one?
You're not sponsored by them.
Not sponsored by them. And they're predicting that headset will sell 3 million units.
Right.
So in their first year. So it's not massive, but it is still quite a lot of units. And I think I am, especially in the games industry, you are seeing this tipping point now where kids want to play VR, and like Roblox, which is the biggest games company in the world, has just announced that they're going to be launching on the new VR headset. So Roblox VR is going to be a thing. 66 million people play Roblox every day.
Wow.
And so like there is this shift that is happening where, you know, my generation, your generation, we grew up with Facebook was this kind of inflection point, right?
Yeah.
Where now your social life is online, and WhatsApp's kind of the same thing. For kids now, that's Roblox. Like my son, your daughter is not going to have a Facebook account in the same way that we do, where you log on and you see updates from your nan. Like that's not going to be a thing. Where they're spending their time, or probably children slightly older than us, like in that 10 to 15 demographic, is Roblox.
I heard briefly, but I have no idea. It's like there's rooms.
Yeah, so
I have no idea. Like,
I mean, like Roblox and Fortnite as well, in a similar context, are basically just platform games. So it basically means Roblox is not a game, and Fortnite is not necessarily a game. They are platforms where other games get put on top of them. So in Roblox, you can go and play racing games. You can go and play games where you don't do anything, you just hang out. You can play fishing games, or you can play shoot 'em up games. But it's the platform. So you go there as your kind of avatar, and you can go, oh, today I want to go and race a car, or today I want to go and fly a plane, and you can do those things.
And chat to your friends.
Yeah, but the real social component of it is that friend nature. So you can be talking to your friends or go and do that same experience with your friends. And so like when I was a kid, when I was like 13, 14, we'd get home from school and you'd go on MSN. And it was this kind of like, hey, what are you up to? Oh, not much. What are you up to? Yeah, nothing much either. So that's gone. And it will now be, you get home from school, oh, I'm going to go and jump in and go and race this car in this game. Do you want to come with me? Yeah, okay. And then we're connected on mics and talking the whole time and having that kind of collective experience together. And that is kind of where in the future VR has more of an inflection point, where the games now that people are playing, like Roblox, is primarily like iPad and PC. When those worlds and those games and those experiences shift to VR, it's kind of where it all ramps up another level, because now it's not just like this 2D interaction. It's like our characters or avatars or whatever you want to call it are together. And it feels like we're more together, and you get that sense of space and sense of presence. And so if we were doing that car racing game in Roblox and we eventually were doing it in VR, we would feel closer together.
Yeah. Do you ever see Ready Player One? Did you ever hear that book?
Yeah, no, I've seen the film.
So yeah.
It's very common that Ready Player One comes up in kind of the VR.
In the chat, yeah.
And obviously, like...
it was a great book. Like, I listened to it first on Audible, and it was just literally like you describing it, that whole, like, talking about like a nearly apocalyptic world where everything's just a bit run down and and the whole world's a bit rubbish, and everybody just wants to spend their time online, because online they can be anybody or do anything they want.
Yeah.
And it upgrades these haptic suits so that eventually the gloves push your sensors on your skin to make your skin feel like something you're holding a plug when you're holding the wheel when you're racing. And these things are all coming, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think like,
when do you think we'll see our first proper haptic suit, or like?
Well, I think I won't go down the haptics technology road. It's a very difficult one for companies to deal with.
Why? What does that mean?
It's very, very expensive to produce. It's not that good. And it will take a very long time to get these kind of haptic suits that you see in Ready Player One. But what is happening, and I think this is the bigger cultural inflection point that we talk about all the time in the gaming industry, is that your digital life and your digital assets for kids now are far more important. And that's, as a statement, sounds quite far-fetched, but you are seeing this, right? The average spend for a child between 10 and 18 on Roblox every month is $15. And now that's kind of like regular sort of pocket money kind of money, right? They're not going and spending that on the things that we grew up spending money on. They want a new set of avatar items in Roblox. They want to spend money in Roblox games, or Fortnite games, whatever it is.
They want the sword. They want the silly, jokey thing that's related to a video. So they want the backpack that does nothing. It's just a backpack.
Yeah, but they care about that.
Yeah,
and that's the inflection point. Is that those kids will grow up, have jobs, and have money, and have purchasing power. And what do they care about? Well, they care about digital items, and they care about digital experiences. And so, as that relates to like VR, that's kind of where these things become a bit more tangible, because I guess like the promise of what Meta is pouring $10 billion quite literally into every year is this idea that the things that you do in Roblox or the things that you do in Fortnite will have not only tangible economic value in terms of reselling them to other people, but also you'll be able to take them from experience to experience. So if I go and purchase a piece of clothing in Fortnite and my avatar has that, then my avatar, when I go to Microsoft Teams in VR, could also have the same thing. And like, you can really go down that rabbit hole, but that's what the big inflection point for this technology comes from, is that actually what people care about now is digital stuff.
Okay, and then briefly, is that how then NFTs came about as well?
Yeah, I don't.
No, it's fine. You don't have to have the answer. I don't get all my guests on and say, well, you must know everything about everything.
So NFTs is a huge kind of worms in terms of like,
because then it starts linking crypto.
Yeah, and
just briefly,
so
send somebody down a YouTube rabbit hole. We don't have to go
at a very high level. what that technology basically enables is those transactions to kind of happen at scale. So that what currently exists at the moment in say a video game. So like I grew up playing RuneScape, right? And I spent real money in RuneScape as a kid. I don't remember what the subscription price was, or I don't remember how much the items cost. But the reality was that when RuneScape shut down in its first form, all that money's gone.
Okay.
But what a decentralized network or a blockchain or an NFT or however you want to kind of call that enables is that actually I now have tangible digital ownership of that digital asset. So that then I always have that. So it doesn't matter if RuneScape shuts down, if those items were NFTs, then I still own those.
Yes, got that bit. No, I got that bit. But then the bit that I then didn't quite fully understand, and like, is that if, say, for example, Ed Sheeran or Taylor Swift decides to release 1,000 NFT albums that exist in Fortnite, those CDs, 1,000 of them, that it somehow codes it through the blockchain that there is literally only 1,000 of those items, because anybody making a video game can just go produce new car and then make a car and then get it uploaded in. So, well, I mean, not anybody, because obviously Fortnite have locked platforms and they all. But if it became open source,
it's scarcity. So what it unlocks is scarcity.
Well done, thank you. Right.
So, and Roblox is making pretty good big moves on this at the moment. Is that like if I create a hat in Roblox and upload it, I can now say actually only 1,000 of these exist.
Back to AI on that one then, right? So what happened, and then again, quick fire questions. What happens if you make an image with AI drawer, which I'm still arguing with I'm struggling with it. The one, maybe it's the one I'm paying for is paying for it over somebody else. And so they're pulling the technology from someone else and it's not entirely working. But I was trying to use it for my thumbnails for my YouTube, right? Because I really want them to look like this cool, like, redraw you in a kind of, if I put your picture in, for those of you listening here, there is software that you can put your picture in to us together and we can say, turn us into Fortnite characters. It mostly works, it takes a lot of coercing. But once I've used the software to make that image, who theoretically owns that image? And is that an original? This is the question. Right. Is that an original creation or is it not?
I don't know the answer to that legally. I would say that.
Legally, I love that. You're like, let me get my lawyers.
Well, so if anyone wants to go down a really deep rabbit hole on that stuff, you can look at either the music industry or the image industry. And like Adobe are spending a lot of money on researching how can they, through some technologies like blockchain, say, oh, this image was made up 0.05% from that image. So if there's future economic value attached to the image that you create, the person who created that original image would receive 0.05% of the royalties.
Wow. That's like sampling in music.
Yeah, it's exactly like sampling in music. The problem that we have is that currently a lot of the information that exists on the internet you don't own. So when you put your Facebook profile picture up, or you put an image on a website, or if you put written content on Substack, you don't own that.
Who owns it?
The platforms.
So Substack owns your newsletter?
Well, not necessarily. It's just that's open. So I can go on your Facebook tonight and download all of your pictures and print them off, and there's nothing that stops.
Yes, of course, right. But if you made a coffee book with my pictures from my holiday, could I not theoretically try and I'd have to then take that back into the real world and sue you in court?
Yes, you could, but not
for
because
intellectual property.
Not because you own those.
But
products.
Because I took the picture.
No, I think because it's more I'm just using your likeness without permission. There isn't an economic value ascribed to those things that you upload freely and willingly to the internet. And I think like the difference that comes across there, when this is more what Adobe are looking at, is like actually, but there are people who are selling images. And so there are people who make money off those images. So if it was originally £1,000 to download this image, then that image can't be used. And what does it look like if that image is going to be used in AI training data? I
think we need to read your Substack on some of these or find some other links, because we've now gone down like we slipped so gently, didn't we? We started off so innocently talking about different things, and then before we know it, we're down like some huge Fortnite rabbit hole. But let's bring this back a little bit to what we're also here for today. Is obviously we have a love for fitness, but through doing all of this, you're also a busy dad as well. And how do you, for that some people listening as well, how do you find through all the things that you're thrown at. So whether you're now going to VC capital, you're trying to get things off the ground, you're starting up side hustles as well as your main hustles, and then you've got other, and now you're a dad of two.
Yeah.
So why on earth, straight up question for some people, it's like, especially from the gaming world, why on earth would you go to the gym and all of that? Why wouldn't you just go home at night and just turn on the Xbox and play 2 hours of Skyrim or whatever it is?
It's
Red Dead Revolver.
Red Dead Redemption. Yeah, that's a great question. I think, my life is slightly different in terms of like, I've always done sports and I've always gone to the gym. And so like a friend of mine the other day asked me, who hasn't really gone to the gym, and he was like, I want to start working out. Like, what advice do you have for me? And I was like, well, I don't really have any, because I do this so habitually. Like, I don't really know why. I just know the difference between going and not going. Like, because I've had stretches of time, say like a month or 2 months, where I haven't done anything, and I know how that feels compared to how it feels when I am regularly doing those things. And I think when you get that, you realize, there's no turning back now.
Yeah. So getting started, lots of people say that, and then a lot of people do speak to me about how they just notice after 3 or 4 days, a week or a month, they haven't done anything, that they just feel like they're missing something.
Yeah.
And then it like affects other parts of their life. And then generally, like what sort of keeps you motivated? Have you had like different cycles with fitness where you've obviously fallen deep in love with it, and then also being like, why am I doing this?
Well, so I think I grew up, and about at like 14, I started playing basketball very seriously.
Wow.
Yeah, by the time I was 17, 18, I went to the Netherlands for 2 seasons to play.
Fantastic.
And
tell us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I just played basketball.
What position?
Point guard. So I was the short one, basically, and did play that quite seriously in the UK. Like, got to the junior top levels in the UK, and then kind of had this opportunity to go abroad and play, which was fun. Kind of realized that like I wasn't really that good enough, wasn't going to make much money out of this. And then I went to university on basketball scholarship in Newcastle, played for the team in Newcastle in the British League, which was fun as well. But a lot of that was basically the introduction to kind of fitness and fitness from more of like a performance sense. And I think then stopping playing, when I was like 24, 23, CrossFit was like, had that same performance element and the fitness element.
And the competitive performance. Yeah. And that's where we met. We obviously, I mean, like, I love how many times I mentioned New Wave in this, but so we met in New Wave, and I mean, it's such a lovely sport, CrossFit, but now then throw in being a dad. So like, it's easy to go do CrossFit for 2 hours at a time when but now how have you found all of that since now you're a dad of 2?
So I think this is the thing why I'm such a massive proponent of CrossFit, but then also coach fitness generally, is that if you invest time into a program that has a coach, whether that's CrossFit or personal training or something like that, what it actually achieves for you is knowledge that you won't lose. And so now I can be in any situation, kind of anywhere in the world, and I know that if I want to do a workout with equipment or without equipment, I know exactly what to do. And I know exactly what to do if I want to do that for upper body, and I know exactly what I want to do if I do that for lower body. Because when you go to CrossFit or when you have fitness coaching, like, someone is telling me that stuff, and you don't forget that knowledge. And so then as it translates to now being like a busy dad, I have way less time. And so I used to go to the gym every day, and now I go twice a week, 3 times a week if I'm really lucky. But I also can know that if I have 15 minutes in the morning, I have the knowledge of what I can do in 15 minutes that is kind of fitness or workout related, and something that's really effective because of the coaching and the teaching that you get. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, I couldn't have written that down myself. And tell me, so then with your friend though, like, why wouldn't you try and get your friend down to CrossFit?
I would. I totally would.
But Come on, you can say
well, so
it's intimidating
the reason,
shit, isn't it?
I personally don't think it is, but I also don't have the perspective. Like, I have a lot of empathy for people that haven't done it before, because I don't know what it's like to show up. And I know this sounds strange, but like, I don't know what it's like to show up to a gym and not be fit.
Okay.
Because when I was a kid, from 7, I was playing football, rugby, everything all the time.
Right.
And it just naturally transitioned into going.
And when did you, so tell me your first day, how did you find New Wave then? And when did you, tell me, try and remember that.
Yeah, so I was playing basketball I played for a team in Middlesbrough for a year, and then for 3 years for Newcastle. And my girlfriend at the time, now wife, she was getting into CrossFit, and she was in the US doing a lot of CrossFit. And I thought, yeah, that's so cool. Like, that's what I want to do. So I said to my S&C coach in my last year of playing, like, I know that I'm not going to get like another contract or whatever after this. And so I'm not bothered about this season. So don't give me performance gym coaching for basketball. I want it to be about CrossFit. So teach me how to do Olympic lifting, teach me how to do all of this.
Oh, fantastic.
Stuff. And so I did get a bit of a cheat head start of having like a personal coach 4 times a week that was going through this stuff with me. But so, yeah, that's kind of how I got started with CrossFit, and then came back, moved to Surrey, and went to the New
and what, you just Googled it and you just like found New Wave?
Well, yeah, we tried a few other gyms.
Yeah, and like, tell me, when did you first meet Fraser? Did you literally just drop in and just go straight for it?
Yeah, we just went straight for it. I mean, like, again, empathy for people that haven't done that kind of stuff before and do that for the first time, but I kind of sort of knew that whatever it was, I'd enjoy it and be all right. So.
Yeah, good times. I mean, it is. Yeah, now it makes a lot of sense why you moved so well. I never knew any of that pro basketball story, because we were literally just chatting about online stuff all the time. And because you've seen me change a bit since I've been down New Wave, like I had more of a, and I just really wanted to share how much I love for it as well. And we were talking about why do a podcast, why do different formats of technology, and it's really just to try and find the message to people. So whether it is like, I could try and do a Substack, I don't have any time in my day, but if somebody reads something, and then it makes them want to go to the gym, then amazing. If somebody watches a video, then yeah, totally. But I also just thought that sometimes for people to hear the conversation of 2 people actually just being like, why they've got to go and why they try and go. Yeah. Because there's a lot of people out there that will love it and they will enjoy it. But I think there's that barrier to entry sometimes that is just so epic. Yeah.
Well, again, from like a mental perspective, I don't really know what that barrier is, but I know what the barrier would be if you went to a regular gym where you go in there, everybody's doing everything different. You're faced with all this equipment you don't know how to use and you don't know what to do. And so you have a bad experience, but you don't really get that with CrossFit because you show up, someone tells you what to do. They tell you what weights to put on the thing. They tell you how to pick it up, how to put it down. And everybody is doing the same thing. And it takes, like, although CrossFit has a bad marketing face, I think the reality is that the barrier to CrossFit is incredibly low compared to going to pure gym and trying to get fit.
Yeah, people really don't know about the scaling. They don't know that the coach will be there, like you beautifully said earlier, like a coaching-led class, the skills and the things you learn. But also the whole thing is scaled for you. Like a decent CrossFit gym will always make sure that anybody's included. And especially at New Wave, with the Fit for Life thing as well, like, seeing people getting their first rope climbs, like over 60 and thinking they never would have done something like that in their life. It's just about the speed and of which you learn, like, and of which the class is paced for you. We're not all asking people to come in and do double unders, and chest to bar pull-ups, in the first month. But turn up and you may get that in a couple of years. We may never get it, like muscle ups. I'm still never going to get muscle up. I'm joking, but well, look, it's been amazing having you on. Did we have any other bits we wanted to cover about maybe? No, just anything? Dad life?
Yeah, I think I already see, and I think you post a lot of content about this as well, and I really relate to that, and why I actually really enjoy the content that you do as well. Is that I do directly see the translations of things that I do in the gym to things that I do with my kids. Yeah. And that's really cool. And I think you posted some videos where it's showing you doing a kettlebell swing and then throwing your daughter up. That's true stuff. And I think like those, especially as a dad, like how you relate physically to your kids, it's quite different from like a mum who's, you know, it's a bit more emotional and that kind of stuff. So the things that I can do physically with like my kids is because of this general like baseline level of fitness. And like if I didn't have that, there would be a huge part of things that my son enjoys doing with me that wouldn't be possible. So like that.
And from your sporting background, then, like how much have you noticed already? So how old's your son?
He's 2.5.
2.5. So how much already have you like had like those play times, and then you've been like, oh, get it in the hoop, and then he's like throws it over the wall, or is he naturally like?
Yeah, I mean naturally already, like he's crazy competitive, and like my wife was a very, very good, much more talented sportswoman than me.
No way.
Yeah.
So tell us about that just briefly then.
Yeah, so she played, if you know about the NCAA, which is like the college league in America. She was basically one of the top college players in the US, and then went on to play international lacrosse. And 2 years ago, she's played at the Lacrosse World Cup.
Wow.
Which was really fun.
So proper sporting family.
Yeah, I mean, much more so than me. She's, yeah.
Have you ever tried lacrosse with the?
I have, yeah, really, really hard.
Is it?
But yeah, so I mean, I already see in my son like so much of how she is competitive in him, and like, you know, we'll play football in the garden, and he like knows the difference between scoring and missing, and like,
oh, amazing!
Yeah, it's cool.
Oh, that's so good, and it's such good things to do together and spend time together.
Yeah,
like I think a lot of parents can also find like active time and play time really intimidating and feel like they always need to have something like an iPad or something. But I think if you play with your kids like proper hard for like an hour, like me and Ella love trampolining, or we'll do wrestling, or we'd even build, you know, the classic old things sometimes as well, like building sofa forts and doing jumping off the sofa and stuff. I think if you build all that into playtime, then they're knackered, they eat well, and then they go to bed. You know, when you have a difficult day, and it is a bit like, okay, obviously traveling is really hard.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, if you just build a bit of that activity and you feel good anyway. So for us, we feel quite good.
Yeah.
Generally because we're active people.